What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of the Dragzine Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Associate Editor Brian Wagner. This week, joining me is Funny Car Chaos Racer Daniel Butherus. Daniel, what's going on?
Just living the dream, man.
Yeah, we're still in that point of the season where you can say that, right? It's not the point where you've ground yourself down where you're like, do I really still want to keep doing this?
I don't know that I've been doing it long enough to get to that point yet. So long as I got pieces together, I'm always eager to get out and do it.
And that's what's funny, that a lot of us racers, we have that mindset. As long as it's running and there's an opportunity, it's like, let's just go, just go. We're like gambling addicts, but we don't get nearly enough money out of the situation, right?
Absolutely. Uh, and heard it again today. If you want to be a millionaire racing, you better start with $2 million.
Yes, that is like, that should be, you can't avoid death and taxes, and you can't afford not doing that. That should be like one of the rules of life, hands down.
I think Bernstein's cruise chief Armstrong once said, "Racing's for people who love work and hate money."
Yes, and you hate your free time, and you want to spend the least amount of time as possible racing your vehicle that you spend piles of cash on.
Absolutely.
But it's, you joke around all you want, but like I said, the second you get that opportunity, and the second you get that signal to light the engine up, it all melts away, right?
Everything melts away. It's almost like you become one with the car. The world becomes right, and nothing else matters.
Yeah, I could be having the worst week of my life, but the second I roll through the gates of any racetrack, whatever happened on the outside of that racetrack doesn't matter anymore. I'm at a racetrack. Completely forget about it.
Yep. Generally speaking, you're with the people you love, doing what you love to do. And if you aren't having fun, you need to find something else.
Yes, the announcer said it the best at the Streetcar Takeover when I was at the event at Indy. He said, "How can you have a bad day at the racetrack?" I'm like, you know what? That pretty much sums it up.
Absolutely.
Even if you're putting a car back in the trailer that's been on fire, rolled over, or beat up, you know what? You still got the race. You can still go back racing eventually.
Right. Well, and the thing is you're usually doing it with the people you love. So even when it's rough, you know, I can think of times where I was just devastated at a race, but later on, I got the memories of being there with my dad, being there with my friends, uh, being there with the people that understand. So, no matter what, it's a good time and a good memory.
Yeah, I think that definitely rings true. I've been in that situation. I've loaded wounded race cars back into the trailer that by the time you're done unpacking whatever went wrong, you're coming up with a plan to make things right. And you're when you're on the road, you're starting to already planning ahead on what to do. And like you said, it's spending time with your friends. I think that's what I love the most about the sport, is that's what you get to do. You're going to be amongst people you like being around, and it makes it easy.
Generally speaking, we tend to be fairly like-minded. So, and even if we aren't, we don't know any better. We're all there for one reason. You mentioned up front, no politics, no religion. Not often I talk about that stuff at the racetrack, and I think that's why everybody's happy. Our grandparents are right. You don't talk about those things in polite society, and you can have a heck of a good time.
Exactly. Exactly. It's amazing what an engine fired in anger will cure, right?
Absolutely, and the smell of nitro.
Yes, yeah, that's always fun too, to see people get their first experience with nitro, and the reactions are always priceless. And you have the different tiers of people. Like, I've been I remember going to some races with my dad, and he's standing there. This is back when they still did throttle laps. So he's standing there, not flinching, just drinking it in. I have to, at that point in my life, I still had enough hearing that I had to have my ears on and like some protection. We brought a friend with us that had never been to a nitro event, and he was clearly shook by what was going on. It was so funny to see that level of desertion between the three of us.
So my wife, our first trip together was actually to the 1998 Mile High Nationals, and we went there for Sunday eliminations, and we got there first thing in the morning, and the first car to fire up was Cruz Pedregan, and I had to bring Kelly straight to the wire up to the pits. Within about 30 seconds, she was slapping me and calling me names, but I was loving it, and she'll never forget it. But hey, she was baptized.
Yeah, you get that baptism. Actually, Cruz Petragon was my first baptism shooting nitro cars trackside. And I thought I was prepared and ready. I've been going these my whole life. I've been in the stands. I'm ready to go. When he dropped the hammer in that car, I about bit the tip of my tongue off, because it's one thing when you're in the stands or along the fence line. When you're about 4 feet from one of those cars and they drop the hammer, that's a different level of experience.
It's like time stop, isn't it? I
Yes.
mean, as soon as it hits, there's that instant of quiet, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. You can feel it in your chest, and nothing's really moving, but the earth's shaking, the air's shaking. It's like time stops. It's the most incredible experience you can have.
Yeah, yeah, I've shot a lot of stuff, and nitro cars going by at full song. Like, yeah, I've been out as far as the NHRA will let you go, and there's really honestly nothing like it. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Now, you've raced a few different. I did a little bit of a Facebook creeping on you to kind of get some intel for this interview, and you've raced a few different, looks like nostalgia blower style cars and whatnot. How did you get to that point of racing cars like that? Because we all have our stories, different guys start out in different things, but how did you end up in a blown open cockpitted nostalgia car?
Well, the honest answer to that is dad. I grew like you. I grew up around the racetrack. I grew up at KCIR, Gateway, the Midwest, going to national events, and dad racing pro gas. When I graduated from high school, the opportunity for him to do the Midwest 790 Association. Uh, he had his altered that he had actually, when I was born, he was racing a degas Camaro, and my first trip to the racetrack, the trailer flipped over and flipped the car and destroyed the Camaro. Well, shortly after that, he bought a 48 Fiat from a guy named Arv Applegate out of Kentucky, and it had been an A altered, a Hemi injected A altered, and for years, Dad raced it with a carbureted big block and ran pro gas and all that. Um, about the time I graduated, my dad said he always wanted to have a blown car, and my stepmom really encouraged that. So he built the blown car, and the 790 Association was running, and he started running that with the altered. And very shortly after, the Outlaw Fuel Altered Association started. So Dad ran the Outlaw Fuel Altered Association for years, and once he went to that, it was my first realization that, hey, this is something I can do. This isn't just something I'm going to sit in the stands and watch and go drive my back bracket bomber. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I don't know about you, but growing up and especially being at KCIR and all that, and having all the HRA national events and seeing everybody in the world, the first time I saw a funny car go by and anything blown and heard that, it was like, man, that's what I want to do. If I could draw a funny car, if I could draw a dragster, if I could draw a blown altered and daydream about it, and get out my Hot Wheels and put on my races, that's what I wanted to do. And he really gave me the inspiration to think that it was something I could actually do. So that's what got me there. It took a little while, but that's the short of it.
It's funny that, like, I'm working my way up the ladder, like I'm building a turbo street car, but in the back of my mind, at some point, I need to have a roots or a screw blown vehicle in my life, for the simple fact that, to me, those sound like the nastiest vehicles on earth, because a roots blower, you got like that kind of going on. And the screw blower just sounds so incredibly angry it wants to rip out your soul. And there's nothing cooler than those kind of noises.
Absolutely. And some would say maybe building a turbo street car, you're at the pinnacle right now. I mean, that's the thing right now, right? But I would agree. I'm making changes now with my operation, but there's nothing like that first experience, firing up that car, sitting in the seat, and feeling the sway of the chassis from the torque it's making every time it pressurizes the engine, and you know it's quite the experience.
Oh, I got to sit in a screw blown pro mod for a video I did for the magazine, and I will never forget the second Craig Sullivan let me hit that ignition button and that car fired up, because literally everything was shaking. And it was just like you staying on the outside of the car, it's one thing, but when you're inside the belly of the beast, it's so hard for people to understand. Like you feel the power in you, and it's like you want to go fast. You either are terrified of it, or you're like, so what do I need to do to make this thing go faster?
Right. It and you can tell the very first throttle whack, you can tell if somebody's going to make it or they're going to fall out. And I've seen people, when you whack the throttle, bump their head on the cage and say, "Get me out, shut it off." And then I've seen people that, "Well, when are you going to be done driving so I can take over for you?" But it's certainly either in your blood or it's not. But I think everybody can appreciate the raw obnoxiousness that is a blown big block.
It's like top alcohol funny cars. That right there is like, that's a man's class. That is even some of the, like, you have to be an animal to drive one of those cars, because you are clutching it, you're leaving at a gajillion RPM, and you are wrestling that car the entire length of the track. It wants to do everything but go straight. It's amazing.
Yeah. If you don't get excited, with an alcohol car launching, I know A Fuel injected nitro has taken over pretty much in the top alcohol dragster ranks, but still, I will. There won't be a day that I won't root for the blown alcohol car. That
Oh,
sound of them coming up on the clutch, the first whack, womp, 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 and bringing it up to that 7-8 grand, some of them higher, and then just screaming to launch. If that doesn't get you excited, you're dead.
oh, and that's what I love about radial tire racing, to a point where you start seeing guys put those engines in door cars. I'm like, this is amazing. It's like you said, it's hard not to love a screw blown Hemi. It's hard.
Well, I'm kind of stuck on the rats, but I get it.
And on the flip side of that, you have a big block like a Pro Charger car running through Zoomies. It's still a blower car, but it's a different kind of angry. It's like the skinny guy angry that can really fight kind of angry. It's a different noise.
Yes, sir.
Now, you did the open cockpit cars for a while, and then going to a funny car is a pretty big change. What made you decide, hey, let's close the coffin and see what happens?
So it was the opportunity just appeared. I mentioned growing up and seeing the funny cars, and still to this day, Hoover Showtime Corvette. When I think about funny car, that's the car I dream about owning. From the time I was 5 years old to now, I think about that. But I built the car as it exists. I built the chassis in 2007. I bought a Mark Williams kit. Um, and actually, my first race car, the guy I got the chassis from, uh, he was a welder, and I think he was more interested in building than actually finishing cars. But I bought the dragster from him, and it wasn't very exciting. So I quickly sold it and bought a Mark Williams funny car chassis kit. And just for where I was, ease of racing and all that, altered body was kind of the right way to go. But around 2016, John Dunn and Gone Racing, posted a 1989 Lumina body on Facebook and said, "Hey, either somebody's going to get this body or I'm going to cut it in half and put it in a quick lube." And I messaged him and I said, "Man, I'd really like to have that body, but I can't make it all the way to your shop." And he said, "Well, my boy's going to California to go pick up a car. If you could meet him at Joplin, Missouri at 1 in the morning And this is the same day, about 3 o'clock, I'm sitting at work. And he says, if you can meet him in Joplin, Missouri at 1 in the morning, and I'm in Wichita, Kansas, then he says, you can have it. So I said, hey, wife, I'm driving to Joplin to go pick up a body. And I ran home with my khakis, my button-up shirt, loaded up my trailer, headed east out to Joplin, about 3.5 hours, 4 hours to there. Met them about 1 in the morning. They unloaded the body into my trailer, and that was it. It wasn't long after that, actually. Chris Graves started talking about having the first Funny Car Chaos, and I had it. I had the body sitting to the side, and I worked on it a little bit here and there. And believe it or not, it was about a month before the first race that I decided I need to get working on mounting that body. So I treat it, I tend it, I can't tell you all the repairs I had to do to that body, because you can imagine at this point, this is what, 2016. It's a 1989 Lumina body. It's seen every form of race rash that you can think of: blowers blowing up, hitting the wall. I did all kinds of creative things to patch that thing up, but within a month's period of time, I treat it, I tend it, I fixed the body, and I made it to that first Funny Car Chaos race in September of 2017, I believe it was.
Awesome. We will touch on that here in a little bit more in 1 second. I've got to hit up our first sponsor of the day. It's MSD, and we're going to talk about the MSD 600 CDI and coil. From Pro Mod to Pro Street, MSD's Pro 600 capacitive discharge ignition is a game changer for cars making big power. Capable of providing 8 individual coil outputs with up to a whopping 680 millijoules of energy, the Pro 600 is an excellent option for racers that previously could only use a magneto. Perfect for 4, 6, and 8-cylinder cars with high cylinder pressure, power adders, nitromethane. The MSD Pro 600 CDI is recommended with ignition coil part number 8232. Will take your engine program to the next level. Learn more at msd.com. Pro coils and magnetos, fun stuff to light off nitro, right?
Yes. I'm very fond of my MSD products. Got a 44 amp Pro Mag, a grid, and have a couple other interesting things for my grid to add on here soon.
And it's funny that I joke that the sponsors on this show are kid tested, racer approved, for the simple fact that a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show, racers are the greatest R&D like research team on earth for companies, because we will find interesting ways to test and destroy products to make them better for the companies.
I'm probably better than anybody in the world at breaking stuff. I promise you that.
Yeah, it's funny when you call up one of these companies and you explain to them what you broke, and the engineer's like, "How did you do that?" I don't know. It just happened. What can we do there? And you know, their little engineer minds thinking, we got to figure out how to fix this, because if this guy's doing it, other people are probably doing it.
Absolutely.
Now, we're starting to hit on the Funny Car Chaos there for a second, and you know, it's become a very popular series amongst fans and racers, and I've very fortunate to get to start watching it on Flow Racing. This past weekend, Chris put on that crazy nitro race, you know, with if it's got nitro, you can run it. That was interesting to watch. What brought you into the Funny Car Chaos fold? What attracted you to it?
Well, first off, it was a place to race and a place for me to race a funny car. As I told you, it was a 1989 Lumina body that I got. And you know, at the time, you know, you're pretty much in the Midwest. You're either racing nostalgia basically pre 1979, or you're racing top alcohol funny car. There wasn't really anywhere to race a, you know, 80s model, you know, even 90s model body anywhere. And Chris initially floated the idea, and a couple guys down in Texas, and I was like, you know, it's probably not for me. I don't have enough to go do this. and they started talking about it, and they're like, no, this is a run what you brung. We're going to have a field and a B field. And the first time it was eight cars and 16 cars. The 8-car A field and the 16-car B field was the first deal. And my dad said, hey, if you can get this done, I'll pay your entry fee and I'll haul you down there, and we'll go have a good time. And I'd got the body mounted and finished the weekend before. We'd gone out to the track. I think I made one lap with a funny car body on, and we headed down to Texas to go make that race. But the big deal is being able to bucket list, knock an item off that list is something that I always dreamed of doing. Being able to go to a funny car race, pull up into the lanes, be strapped in the car. I tell you, there's nothing like the experience of being strapped in the car, front of the line, and listening to the national anthem play. It's like so much America, I can't hardly stand it, And then go ahead, fire it up, going through and hearing that experience. And, I remember pulling into that first race at Denton. And, I remember the first trailer on the right was John Hale's One Bad Texan. Shortly followed by Blue Max, shortly followed by Mr. Explosive, the Invader. There were all these cars, the Crop Duster, Frank and Deb Owsley's car. There's all these cars, top alcohol cars, fuel cars, names that I knew, and I'm rolling into the pits, and I got to race with these guys. You hear the term fam girl. The first time we rolled into the pits for Q1 and I'm rolling up past the Blue Max, I about lost my stuff, but it was a heck of a deal.
What was it like the first time, talking about that you're getting through this experience, and what was it like for you to have, the engine starts and the body closes? I mean, what was that like? Can you relive that moment? Do you remember it?
I do. My car is a little bit unique. It's a Chevy. Now it's a pedal clutch, but it still has an onboard starter. So I've never had the body drop down with it fired. It's always been started with the body down. But I will tell you, the first time with that body dropping down, it's kind of eerie because everything's kind of quiet. Everything's muffled. You don't really hear the noises like you do. I'd race the altered body and blown altered with the zoomies pointing at my head, and I had to wear earplugs. But the body drops down, everything goes quiet, the world falls away, and in a way, it's almost like a coffin. Because the side windows, they extend forward of you, so it's not like you can look to your left and your right and look out the window. You're looking at dark to the left of you, you're looking at dark to the right of you, and you have this small picture window out front, almost like a viewfinder. You remember the old viewfinders that you'd flip when you were a kid? The vision is almost kind of like that. But then it fires up, and the body does kind of a rock on the chassis, and you see it vibrating, and it's almost like you become one with the car. You had mentioned sitting in that blown Pro Mod, and you feel everything. You feel it going into forward. You feel, the engine start to tug the tires and roll. You feel every single bit of it. I think driving by the seat of the pants is a very apt term, because you definitely feel everything you're doing. And the car really does tell you what it wants.
Yeah, especially I could imagine again with I almost want to try to drive a funny car. Notice I said try to drive a funny car just to feel that sensation, because it's all the anybody from Ron Capps, Jeff Deal, any funny car driver I've talked to has said that like you have to feel this car, what it wants to do. It's not like a top fuel dragster where it's a little more stable. A funny car is pretty much a multi horsepower Bronco slash bull that's angry and on ice.
Yes, but I tell people, and they think and I don't know if it's my animal brain taking over when the car is roaring and whatever, but the car almost tells you what to do. If you try to over muscle that car, you're going to end up unhappy in a wall one way or another. But the car almost tells you what it wants you to do. I mean, it tells you, you know, when the rear end starts coming out, when it gets loose and the rear end starts coming around, it automatically wants to counter steer. And if you just if you let it do what it wants to for a little bit, most of the time it'll carry you straight. So it's almost an art of trusting the car and and knowing when you need to be in the pedal and when you need to be out of the pedal. And it really tells you.
Has you, if you had those kind of those pucker moments where the cars kind of reminded you who's in charge?
I've had a couple of those. Had one at the last race where I flattened a perfectly good set of headers on second round of qualifying. Oof. So absolutely.
What's that sound like inside the car? Or can you hear?
You know, honestly, I didn't really know that I'd got the wall until I got in and got out of the car. I knew I was close. You know, the bad thing is, and I know dragsters can be the same way, but usually they'll set the front wheels down pretty quick. You know, usually with my car for the first 100 feet, if you really need to steer the car, you better be out of the gas because, you know, the front tires aren't on the ground for you to be able to give it any input. But it's also, unless you really get into the wall, and in this case, I got the headers with the wall, but I kind of put a little love tap on the body, barely touched the body. And like I said, I didn't really know I'd hit the wall until I got to the end and looked at the headers and thought, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
But
oops.
Yep. Well, what am I going to do now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's the situation sometimes you're in where you do something as a racer with some of these heads up cars and you got to kind of figure it out on the fly. And it's funny standing trackside. The reason I asked what it sounded like, because I've been trackside and on some of the radial tire stuff, you know, they say what goes up must come down. And some of these guys that don't know how to pedal out of wheelies and those cars come down and like your knee, like your legs touching the wall and you can feel it in the wall and they're like 50 yards down track. I'm like, I wondered to myself, like, what did that sound like inside the car? That had to sound like a car crash, literally.
You know, and honestly, if I had an onboard camera, I think the sound that it spit out would tell you something different than what I'm telling you. But, you know, I feel the car more than I hear it. And I don't know. Like I said, everything, when that body goes down, it seems to go quiet. So I really didn't hear it. Really didn't much feel it. Mostly it just knew I was close to the wall and I needed to get away from it. So
it seems like the quicker and faster you go, that your reactions and skills as a driver have to grow exponentially in a hurry. You know, I found that out of my own firsthand. I could only imagine in a funny car or one of those, you know, a fuel altered, what it's like to have to stay on top of your game on one of those.
Well, I can only speak for myself in this, but I think a lot of it is instinct. You know, I'm sure I'm no different than anybody else. I've sat in the car in the garage for hours making passes in my mind, you know, not necessarily hours at one period of time, but, you know, I've made 10, 15 passes at a time in that car, you know, this, and this. Close my eyes. I know this is where the shifters are. This is where the buttons are, you know, almost to where you get it to a point where it's instinct. I think for me, if I were to have to really think about any of the things I was doing while I was making the pass, it wouldn't go so well. I think instinct takes over while you're going. It's kind of a survival mechanism, I think. You know what I mean? Your body reacts. I know when the first time I really went fast, you get that, you know, they talk about tunnel vision. You know, you can see everything narrowing. And after a couple passes, you know, you get to where you can start seeing markers on the track. Oh, well, there's the 300-foot cone. There's this, you know, there's a 660. You know, the more passes you make, the slower it feels where you're going. But again, It's not like I can recall myself thinking, oh, but I guess I got one exception to that. Back before the funny car days, running the altered, I was making licensing passes to get an advanced ET license, and about 300 foot air got up under my helmet and ripped it up in front of my eyes.
Oh,
And I was thinking, oh man, this is gonna hurt. This is it. And I'm pedal clutch car, got a handbrake and a steering wheel. So I had to think in that moment, oh wait, you can grab your helmet and pull it down. So I pulled my helmet down, and I was right on the stripe, and I think I took out a cone, but and I went through the stripe holding my helmet down, and I think it was a 740 something at 170 when it came down, but still. That's the only moment that I can think of where I really had to pause and think, oh, wait, it's not over. I got something I can do. I can pull my helmet down and, drop the chutes and everything's okay. But I think when under most circumstances, even when the car is a little bit squirrely, instinct takes over more than just, this is what's happening. I need to do something.
it's funny you talk about instinct and running through situations in your mind. I had a similar situation with my Nitro Street car. There was a malfunction of some sort, and the car immediately lost fire, went dead. The first thing I did was get to the left, and I'm looking underneath the cow. I'm like, all right, am I Ricky Bobby on fire? That's like literally the first, with nitrous cars, you honestly have to think about that. And that's like one of the things I've seen countless times of, when there is no flame, there could be flame. So all at the same time, I'm trying to get the car over to the left, get it stopped, pop my belts, and pop the hood, and like hope that if there is something bad happening, that the track guys are going to be there in a hurry with the fire extinguisher.
Right.
And it, like you said, it comes down to instinct. You think about the situations, and it doesn't matter like how quick or fast you're going. You have to be situationally aware and be ready, because that way, I think that's what saves and helps a lot of racers at every level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I can't underscore how important it is to know the car you're in. Like I said, I had an instance, I have a helmet strap. My helmet's never lifting up over my eyeballs again, but I knew where the brake was. I knew where the fuel shutoff was. I knew where the kill switch was. I knew where the fire bottle was. If it was fire and it was smoke, at least I would have known what to grab. I would have tried to keep it straight. And if I didn't hit anything, I'd just be grabbing a handful of brake and trying to slow it down. Right. But, I think for about anybody I can think of talking to, about all of us that do this, really, we sit in our cars, we make laps, we think about what's going to happen, we go through scenarios in our head just so when that split second decision has to be made, what am I going to do, right? I've seen instances where throttles is stuck. Are you going to pull the fuel or are you going to kill it? When I was at Ennis, as a matter of fact, for the first Funny Car Chaos race this year, after Q2, I got through the lights and all of a sudden the RPM started coming up and it started taking off. And, I went through that. Do I pull the fuel? Do I, kill it? What do I need to do? And, in such case, I thought, I'm just going to hit the kill switch, because if I lean it out with it screening like this and I blow it up and catch it on fire, that's going to be worse. And in that case, it had sucked a gasket through the injector and the blower, and it was just sucking air in like it was full throttle. So, but it's very important that you think about these things. What are you going to do? Because I really think you thinking ahead, adds to those instincts. You just intuitively know this is what I need to do. And if you don't practice it, you're going to be in trouble.
Especially at the speeds and as quick as what you're going, that you necessarily don't have time to think. You have to act on instinct. It's almost muscle memory, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like I said, the car gives you a lot of feedback. I every now and then, and I don't know how to describe it, but every now and then the car will get to a point where it just doesn't want to steer. You're in there and you're trying to fight it when you're fighting that car, and it doesn't want to come around. And so long as you're not hitting the wall, it's one of those things you just got to let go and let the car do what it needs to do and let it settle down. But I can't, yeah. Again, I can't underscore how important enough it is to know your car and to pay attention to it.
Live to fight another day, right?
Absolutely.
You don't want to have to visit your chassis guy. That's never a fun visit. It's like going to the regular doctor.
I can't afford to visit the chassis guy. I got to be able to do it myself, and so
Hey, we had Jason Lee on the show, and he talked about how he was in a points chase, and they took the car and they used a four wheeler and the winch in the trailer to pull it straight, pull a core support out at the track. You got to do what you got to do.
absolutely. And more times than not, you got to hope that you have good enough friends to, or you've treated your friends good enough that they're willing to step in and help you out to that point.
Yeah, I have this thing with racers that we don't have friends, we have enablers. We have people that just, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And a lot of times it might not be the best idea, but guess what? Your buddy Bob convinced you to do it, and by God, guess what? We're gonna do it.
Yep. They're the first ones to tell you to send it. It's fine, send it.
Yeah. And I have found a lot of times when I was a crew guy, it's scary when I have to be the voice of reason. I'm like, let's take a step back here a second and let's just make sure we think about this because, I'm not going to be the one in the car, but you're the one in the car. And, you're saying, send it, let's think about what could go wrong here, guys.
Absolutely. And I've for sure been in that situation too. And I can't tell you how many times I've got home, pulled the pan, and thought, thank God I didn't run one more time. I mean, I think, I think, I think there's got to be somebody looking after most of us because, you get in the heat of the moment. It's hard, and I didn't really see what happened, but at the winter nationals this past weekend with Mike Ashley, I had heard, and the gist I got is maybe that he had got overheated and wasn't feeling well and kind of got dizzy, and he made the right call. He got out of that car, and there's a ton of people listen to this that have been experiences like that. That's hard to do when you're in eliminations, when the heat of the moment, and you got all these crew guys that have busted their butt making that decision to, hey, you know what? Let's go back to the pits. Let's call it a day. Have a beer, cool down, have a pop. There'll be another time to go fight, and that's a sign of a good mature driver being able to do that.
When you get to the point in your decision list, when you have to say, well, what's the worst that could happen? When you have to ask that question, that's your sign. Stop whatever you're doing. Just stop.
Absolutely. That's it. If it can happen, it will happen.
Yeah. And I've seen that where I've seen the flip side of that coin where someone hasn't taken that step back in a fast car, hasn't said, well, what's the worst that can happen? Oh, it'll be okay. It's all fun and games until you start putting ventilation holes and blocks and things like that. Then it's bad.
It gets expensive real quick.
Yes.
And yeah, there's only so many times you can do that people are going to be understanding, and you can go home and look your wife in the face and say, honey, I blew it up again, I got to buy another motor. That's a pretty bad feeling when you know how much time, effort that you put into this, and you knew you just threw it in the trash can. So
now, one of the cool things that I like about Funny Car Chaos is the tracks that the series visits. It's throwbacks. It's tracks that I'm not going to say aren't bad. They're not bad tracks. They're just not, we'll say like a national event level track. What's it like for you to be able to go to these, smaller venues, these old school fields and these tricky tracks? That's got to be fun because the fans always seem to love it. And that tricky surface has got to equalize things a little bit, right?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been in 3 finals this year, and the I other than really Wichita, both I really believe both in well, especially in Amarillo and somewhat in Odessa, you know, that's played to my ability to be able to make a final, and really played in my ability to be able to win a first race. Um, I Second round at Amarillo, I had Tim Boychuk. What's the chances with a roots blown alcohol Chevy that I'm going to take out Tim Boychuk in his Nostalgia Nitro funny car, right? Well, I left on him. He had to pull. I think Twig Ziegler told me before we ran that he put the tune up in the car like he ran in the early 70s just to get it down the track. So he's doing everything he can to get down the track. I'm just going with the mindset, you know what? I just need to go to A to B. And in this case, I got stuck in the left lane, which was really was, if you could say there was an undesirable lane at a track, this particular race, the left lane was pretty rough. I got stuck in the left lane. He had lane choice from first round by, I want to say, a couple hundreds. And so I left on him. I was going for the center line. I was right at the stripe. I didn't see him. I didn't hear him. I ended up outrunning him just barely. But and on no other track at no other time could I ever outrun those guys. Don't take it as I got some kind of monster fast car, because that's just not the case. But at that track, I had the car that was capable of going down the track lap after lap, and it was really an equalizer for me. And let's face it, it makes it fun. If we go to a track like, first race of the year, we went to Ennis. There aren't many better tracks in the United States.
No.
I think it's fair to say, right? And I knew, especially with 70 cars there was very little chance I was going to qualify. It wasn't going to be an issue of people not being able to go down the track because they had to figure out where to take the power out, right? You go to a track like Ennis and you put it all on the track on the starting line, in the middle, and in the end, right? You go to a track like Amarillo and, hey, maybe the starting line isn't bad, but from 60 to 100 foot, there's a transition from the concrete to the asphalt that's a little tricky. So you got to control it there. And, maybe there's some bumps at the half track that make the car want to get squirrely. And, a guy like me that's, bucks down and, doesn't have everything in the world, it makes it fun because I can line up with anybody on any given pass and give them hell. So absolutely, tracks make it wonderful. And I want to say, you talked about the fans. A lot of these tracks that we go to aren't necessarily real close to a national event venue. So, we have a lot of awesome race fans that may not get to go to a national event, may not get to go to a throwdown at T-Town or an Armageddon or, any one of these races. So, if they're going to see a big race, if they're going to see a blown car, if they're going to see a nitro car, Funny Car Chaos is that chance for that track to have it at that venue. And you want to talk about the most wonderful down-to-earth fans. I mean, one, they know they're racing, and two, they are so appreciative. You almost want to go back every week to go hang out with these people. Honestly, we have the best fans in the world.
And I think that it's what Chris has kind of grown with this series and having the A, B, and C fields, and it's a show. That's like I had getting to see it on the live feed. I'm like thinking to myself, like, this is like an old school show. This is, you pay the money to get in and you get to see, you're going to see something cool every round of racing, whether it's from the funny cars, the gassers, whatever is in there. It is a front to back show.
Absolutely. And, one of the most impressive things, and I told I'd gone to a couple races with my dad before my current crew was able to ever go with one. And, I told him ahead of time, if Chris says we're going to run at this time, that's the time we're going to run. And I can tell you the exception for me has been with Chris is when he said, you know what, there's something come, we're going to run early. And matter of fact, I missed Q3 at Wichita because there was a potential of storms coming and, dew setting in and it getting real dark at the track. So Chris said, you know what, we're going to start early. And, I just wasn't able to get back in the track with the repairs I was making to make Q3. And, I think beginning to end, he's pretty good about hitting those times and those schedules. And, my dad always, hit on the fact, cars have got to go down the track to keep fans at the track, right? If you're sitting and you're waiting for cars to go down and they're not meeting those schedules, and you figure, you spent $100 to bring your family to this race, right? And you don't run your finals until 1 a.m. And that's, they don't even get to see what they came for. And, Chris pushes real hard to make sure that we are in the lanes, that we are suited up, that we are running so we can put on a show for those people that spent that money to allow us to do what we do. Because, I tell all the people when they come to the track telling me thank you. So, no, you don't understand. I get to do what I do because you paid for that ticket. That is the only reason why there is a place for me to race. So, I don't care what I'm doing. If a fan, if somebody comes by, asks for an autograph or they have a question, I've been under the car with oil dripping all over my face. I get out from under that car and I go talk to that fan because, again, if they aren't willing to pay for a ticket, nobody's going to book us to race, and I got nowhere to go.
And I think more racers and more sanctioning bodies and promoters need to understand that you're putting on a show for the fans. They go there and have a good time. They're going to tell people. And then guess what? When that track releases that schedule next year, they see funny car chaos. It's not a negative thing that pops in. Like, man, I had a great time there last year. Guess what? We're going again, and we're going to go for 2 days this time. That's how you build that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have we have people that travel from race to race all over the place. And, I just going to assume that, Brian and Nitro Kevin Hoffsmith, they go all over the place. They are there. They are appreciative. They make me want to do what I get to do because, they travel all over to see what we do. We have super fans. Chris calls them super fans that, they step up to help us with our purses so we can add fields so more cars can race. It's just amazing the fans that we have. And I think it all comes down to what Chris made and what Chris drives. Do big burnouts, do dry hops, have a backup girl or guy, have handouts and shirts, throw them to the crowd, engage them. Realize that you're entertainers. You're not race car drivers. You're entertainers. That's what we are. We're there to entertain. And because we get to entertain, we get to do the things we love. But, it's so important.
Totally. Now, before we kick the show into high gear, I got to thank our last sponsor, JE Pistons, and racers building big block Chevy engines with their newest generation 20-degree valve angle cylinder head can rely on JE's new 20-degree series pistons to get a custom feature off the shelf convenience. They're available both naturally aspirated, nitrous oxide applications with a variety of bore spaces. To learn more about them, head over to jepistons.com. Big block Chevy stuff, the good stuff, right?
Right. And I have JE pistons in my car.
There you go. Another kid-tested, mother-approved part, right?
Yeah. So, I built this motor, and about that time, JE came out with their shelf big dome, big block Chevy blower pistons. And as soon as I saw that, I knew that's what I had to have. So that's what I run in my car. I call them up. I tell them I want the part number. They send it to me, and I go run. And they're good parts.
It's nice to have exotic stuff. Cutting edge stuff is neat, but it's also nice to be able to go to Summit's website, type in a part number, and it's there in a day.
Absolutely.
Especially
it's even nicer when you can go to an auto parts store and say, I need this for a big block Chevy, and you can give. Now, of course, they got to know what year, what car, what trim package, and all that before they'll even help you out. But at least I can go, and if I really needed to get by, I could get a gasket from O'Reilly's for my car.
You just mess with them and say, yes, my funny car is 4-wheel drive. Just get me the gasket.
Right. Right.
Now, where do you see the future of nostalgia racing and stuff like the funny car chaos and these other nostalgia things going? It's been honestly it's been pretty popular and maybe growing slower in popularity, but do you think it's going to keep on that track, with the March meet and all that stuff?
Well, I think the March meet offers something most other places don't. And, I've not ever been. My dad's been. I have a lot of friends that have been, and I watch every live feed I can. But it's one of those races that has a lot of cars of yesteryear. Without the electronics, without the traction control, without all those things that you get to. You're as close to getting to hear and see what it sounded like back then. Obviously we're not roasting the tires from the starting line through the quarter mile, at least not on purpose.
Yeah.
But you know that single mag 392 or 427. I think there is nothing nastier sounding than a nitro Chevy. I don't care what you have to say about anything else, but I think about the Hilton's car. I think about Ray Stringer's car, or Tim Hay, rest his soul. But man, there is nothing like the sound of a nitro Chevy, and you can't go see it anywhere else than a place like the Chaos or a March Meet. So I think it offers the fans a chance to see something that they're not going to go see at a national event, that they're not going to go see at a PDRA race, or there's some unique things that kind of bring back those emotions that a lot of us felt, growing up and seeing all that. I think it'll be around for a while. I think it's challenged by technology and kids today. I spend as much time trying to describe to people and help them understand how our car works, how mechanical fuel injection works. When you talk about this stuff to a bunch of tuners, to EFI guys that are using a computer to read you know EGTs and airflow and all that kind of stuff, cylinder pressures to tune the car for you. When I tell them, well, basically this is a ball valve and it's either on or off. And I have a bunch of poppet springs with little pills that go off at certain pressures that allow pills to bypass, and you're describing all this stuff and they're flabbergasted that this even works. Well, that's just some kind of magic. So I think there's opportunities for people to experience new things they haven't. And I've never had anybody walk away and say, man, that's boring. But I think with technology, and you'd mentioned turbos, and we talk about the electric cars that they're pushing in. A lot of this stuff of yesterday, we talk about things that are hard to relate. Carbureted cars and all that are kind of hard for kids to relate with these days. So that's a struggle for us. So that goes back to putting on a show. If we can put on a great show, we can keep people coming, and that's what's gonna keep us going.
Well, you guys got a turbo funny car chaos,
Gonna
so
have too soon.
that's it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not surprised someone hasn't done it sooner, but it was what, Ohio George. I think I did a story on that car, that turbo car he had, decades ago. When I saw that up at Detroit Autorama, I'm like, thinking back, I'm like, when he built this car, this had to be like voodoo black magic to all these old school guys to see that.
Absolutely. And you think Adams and Increz, the Hellborn turbo car. There were several people that tried it, and I was talking to Frank Parks last week, and I'd mentioned I'm actually working on converting my car to twin turbos, but uh, and I'll get to the reason why, but it's going to be mechanical fuel injected just because that's what I know and that's what I love, and it's going to be a pedal clutch. And everybody says, well, that won't work. Frank Parks, I don't know if you know this, but Frank Parks ran a uh, twin turbo top alcohol dragster back in the
I didn't
late
know that.
70s, early 80s. And the struggle is either it didn't have any power or it had too much power and you couldn't put it down. And Frank's first was, well, it's awful hard. You're going to struggle to make that work. And this gives me an opportunity to plug one of your sponsors, but you know, I run a 44 amp mag and I run a grid. Well, you know, the boost control modules, you know, that boost control and that timing control that we have today were things that they didn't have in the past that allow these things to work. And you know, as well, how are you going to make it spool? You know, it's not like I have just the wastegate with the single spring and that is what it is. You know, we got dome pressure with CO2 these days, so you can get it to spool early, and you can control that. You can control that boost down the track incrementally all the way down. You can't do that with a blower. Um, you know, my reason and my dad, you know, every year the cars get faster in what we do, right? And we have some pretty stout alcohol cars. We have pretty stout fuel cars show up. Hell, you know, Worsham showed up, and you know he was running 320s, 319s, you know, up until the very last pass. So we got stout cars that show up, and here I am with an iron block, cast head, water head, you know, basically super comp motor with a 1471 high helix on it. And my dad's asking me, you know, everybody's going quicker. How are you can compete? You're either going to have to step up to a Hemi or and all this stuff, or you're going to have to hang it up. And I'm like, my game ain't over yet. You know, I've wanted to do the turbo thing for a long time, running the nostalgia stuff. They wouldn't allow it. But, you know, I tell everybody, you know, the big advantage is, you know, it takes a lot of power to turn that blower. You know, I'm spinning that blower 55% on my car. It's not the greatest blower in the world, but it's decent. But to make the boost that I'm making, I'm spending that 55%. It's taking a ton of power to do that.
Yep.
I can run the same boost and not be pulling all that power away from the crank and be throwing it to the rear tires. And I think I could make my Chevy pretty scary for some of those cars out there. So that's my goal for the end of this year and next year.
Well, look at it this way. You know, big block twin turbo pro mods in the NHRA before they started putting handcuffs on them, they were going pretty fast.
Yep.
So, you know, you look at it that way, and it's always funny when you know, I call it dreaming up stuff when you drive in places and whatnot, and it's always interesting to think about. I always go back to what would happen if I took X combination and put it in a dragster or a funny car, because you have practically no weight to it. You have a lot of advantages to it. And I think it'll be interesting to see what you can do with that as you learn how to apply the power, because that's the big thing with turbos is once you get that power management down, there's a lot to unlock there.
Absolutely. And, you know, everybody says, well, mechanical fuel injection pedal clutch, you know, how are you going to do that? Who's out there that's doing it? And I'm going to assume you know the name Judd Kaufman. You know, Judd Kaufman, and over in Australia, a guy named Ash Hamlin, he's running mechanical injection automatic, but, you know, Judd runs a 3-speed and a 481X twin turbo 3-speed B&J pedal clutch, and that thing's deadly quick. It wins a lot of races. So I think there's some people to lean on out there, you know, that can help me with this learning curve that, you know, could make it interesting for me next year.
I think that's going to be pretty wild to see. And you know, the questions that I ask sometimes, I always like to end on a note where I throw something fun at my guests. You know, I've got many mystical powers on the show. I have a time machine, an unlimited bank account. I've made people rulers of drag racing. For you, Daniel, I'm going to give you an interesting scenario here. You can pull any classic funny car from history and race it in modern times, anytime, anywhere. Which car are you going to pluck from the timeline of drag racing history to race, and why are you going to choose that car?
Well, I already pulled it up. It's going to be the blue. You know, a lot of people's favorites, the white version of the Showtime, which was a 77, 78. My favorite has always been the blue fade paint job Showtime Camaro or Corvette of Tom Hoover. And if I could have that car today, I would. I think my wife would struggle to get me out of the garage.
Just sit there and stare at it and go, that's mine.
Yes, absolutely.
It's funny, you know, I built my Hero Card Wall of Fame back here, And I remember when I was going through all of my my hero cards, I had a couple of Tom Hoovers, but his were always a little bit different sized, so they wouldn't fit my frames to fit the pattern I was going to lay out. And I'm pretty sure I had, might have been one of his black cars, but I remember because you flip it on the back, and Tom had that beard and the haircut, and he looked more like a high school algebra teacher than a Nitro funny car driver.
Absolutely. He was too classy for us, and so were his cars. Man, they were all beautiful.
Yeah, you see some of these guys. It's always funny, I always joke, Doug Coletta looks like my accountant. He doesn't look like somebody that would drive a nitro car.
Absolutely. And I work. I'm. I work at Cessna Aircraft. Manufacturing engineer by degree. Did that a lot of times, and did that for years before what I do now here. But I can't tell them how many people when I tell them, well, "What are you going to do this weekend?" I'm going to race. Oh, what kind of racing are you doing? You going to ride a bike or something like that? No, I got a funny car. I got to go hop in. You do what?
Yeah.
And I remember, and make this as quick as I can, throwback. But when I was a kid going to school, uh, somebody was asking me what my dad did, because I always talked about going to the races with my dad. And I said, well, my dad works at Cessna. And he's like, well, he can't work at Cessna and and race cars too. And explaining to him back then, it's kind of like our alter egos. On weekends, we jump into the phone booth, change our clothes, and all of a sudden we're Superman. But I think most of the people that do this, unless they know outright, they would never suspect what we do on our weekends off.
When I used to work back in the day in, corporate professional America, that was definitely the case, that a lot of people would ask a lot of questions. They thought I wore a black leather jacket, and they thought I was friends with Big Chief. And, I'd explain to them kind of what I do, which, at least they knew. But nowadays, I associate nothing with nothing but degenerate racers. So, it works out better that way. I don't have to explain myself nearly as much.
Oh, well, that would make it a whole lot more fun.
Yeah, it's funny is nowadays, I've got pictures with some of the guys from Street Outlaws. I hang out with them, and it's when you're in the industry, you're at the track, and you're like, oh, it takes me a minute sometimes to realize that I used to be the person on the other side of the rope, and now I'm in these guys' pits talking with them as my job, and it's kind of weird sometimes. I still haven't fully adjusted to it after doing it for so long.
It's all right. I never. I roll into a funny car chaos race with my quarter-ton Dodge truck, my 24-foot tag trailer, pulling in a funny car. I roll into the gate, and the gate asks me, "Well, what class are you running?" And I say, "Funny car," and they say, "No, really, what class are you running?" So I get past that. I roll in, and I see these semis, and again, like I said, you see names in the trailer like Blue Max or you know hitter top alcohol cars, hitter fuel cars, Dale Worsham's trailer, and I pinch I'm really here to go race with these guys. So I fully understand that notion.
And the thing you got to remember is trailers don't win races.
No, they don't.
I've been on a team where we didn't have the most fancy tow rig. We didn't pull in with a big stacker or anything like that. We didn't have a lot of the fancy stuff. But guess what? We went out there and cracked a lot of skulls because we worked hard and did what we had to do.
I work hard and I get lucky a lot.
Yeah, that's too. I learned this phrase in wrestling in high school. I'd rather be lucky than good because lucky has a better chance of beating good more often than not, right?
Well, I think for us, and you'd mentioned last go back on Funny Car Chaos. One of the things is that makes guys like me successful is 9 times out of 10 we're going to go down the track, and that's our advantage. 9 times out of 10 I'm going to go down the track and I'm going to make you make a pass. If you screw up, I'm going to kick your tail. If you don't go down the track, I'm going to go down the track. It's that's how I'm going to survive in this world.
And if you went out there and talked to most smart racers, do you want to set a record? and maybe have an issue the next pass, or you want a consistent car that goes A to B? The smart racer is going to go, give me A to B, because that's the person, honestly, that it doesn't matter if you have the faster car. That's the one you got to watch out for, because if you do make any kind of slip up, guess who's going to drive right on past you, giving you the Queen's wave and having a good time?
I will say, Ken Singleton and Kurt Williams, those cars flat out fly, but they're A to B every time. And you want to talk about two bad scary cars in the world of funny car chaos. I walked into Ken's trailer at Odessa, and he turned around, and it was the first time after we ran, and I said, I just wanted to congratulate you on finally kicking my tail. We got that over with, so let's never run again. And he turns around and he looks at me and he says, man, I'm just struggling. I'm having a hard time. And I'm like, this guy goes to any track in the world and he runs the same number. Everybody else is struggling. And I told him, I said, Ken, you've spent this whole deal on Funny Car Chaos making a living out of making us look silly. Just do what you do. And I can't tell you how impressed I am. Him and Kurt Williams both, man. They go down the track. Doesn't matter the track. They're screaming. They're flying. They're putting on a show, and I can't help but appreciate what they do.
It's always fun when you get to race with guys like that, because it makes you better, because you always have, we used to always joke on the laptop, there were certain guys we knew if we had to race them, we had the Jason Lee tune up, that we'd have to pull that from the back file. We're gonna have to turn this car up more than we typically do, because we know he's faster, and we're gonna have to throw our biggest haymaker at him.
Unfortunately, I'm throwing my haymaker every pass.
But hey, you got some wins. You made it to the finals. That's all that counts, right? It's working for you.
It is working for me. I think I've finally I've bled enough finally, maybe to win a round or two.
Well, Daniel, our time here is coming to the end on the show, and I like to give my guests their opportunity to, pull off the old John Force and thank all their sponsors and tell people where to learn more about the racing operation. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, my friend, so you can thank who you need to thank, tell people where to find you on social media, what you got going on. So it's all you.
So first off, I got to start with my dad, Tom Butherus. I got to thank him for all the time as a kid he spent in the garage with me, teaching me how to work on a car, how to maintain a car, how to do things myself. Next, I got to go with crew guy Lee Sisk. That man is over at my shop whenever I need help. If I tell him that I'm going somewhere or I need something picked up, he goes. He's at my shop, sweating his tail off till late at night. Followed by Billy and Tracy Souls out of Wellington, Kansas, and Traveling Smoke Barbecue. They helped me out after I destroyed a funny car body and helped me get going again. They support me in any way I can. They show up to the races. They're great crew. They're great people and have great barbecue. And this year, I gotta bring up the sponsors of Funny Car Chaos. You go to an NHRA national event and there's flags on the wall that says MSD, it says whoever. And, they have great support networks and they do a lot of things that allow them to keep going. But you go to a Funny Car Chaos race, we have a Fred Spell Paving, we have a Ed Wolf Pumps, we have Mears Mazda Volvo, countless others, Redline Shirt Club. But these guys are there and they're there helping us. I've blown up parts, hurt parts. Ed Wolf and Fred Spell, they're searching all over the place trying to find me parts, keep me going racing, encouraging me, calling me through the week, making sure I'm okay, making sure I have the things I need to keep racing. So I just want to, I know there's a lot of chaos sponsors that I haven't touched on, but I just want to tell you how unique and wonderful it is an opportunity to get to do what I do, racing in the series I race. So God bless them and thank them very much.
And I think people, if you want to really support the series, like you said, go to funnycarchaos.com. like those sponsors pages, tell them how much you appreciate it, because that will encourage them when Chris comes knocking on their door for 2022 for them to sign on the dotted line again. It shows a return on investment.
Absolutely. And, we are in those places because those guys show up and lay down that money. Bottom line.
Well, I've got to thank my sponsors of the show: Performance Distributors, Airflow Research, ProCharger, Holly, MSD, Flowmaster, Mosier Engineering, Comp Cams, Eldebrock, Fuel Air Spark Technology, Manley, JE Pistons, and Dart. They all give me the opportunity to come on here and talk to racers like Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be able to make it to a Chaos event and come look you up sometime and have some of that barbecue from your sponsor.
You better show up to Mocan.
I'm going to try. I've got the different dates circled on there. I'm trying.
Well, I'm just going to tell you, if you want to experience, if you want to throw back, you got to go to Mocan.
I am going to try like hell to make it to that event and any of the Funny Car Chaos stuff, but that one in particular I've heard. I'm going to try to make it to that one.
All right.
Appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me.